They push your buttons. They test your patience. They want a reaction. But here's the truth most people don't understand. The moment you lose control, you lose power. Staying calm isn't weakness, it's discipline. It's control. It's strength in its purest form. Let's break it down. The moment someone provokes you, your mind and body react instantly. Your heart rate rises, your thoughts speed up, and there's a strong urge to respond right away. That first reaction feels natural, almost automatic, like you have to defend yourself or prove a point immediately. But that instant response is exactly where control is lost. When you act in that split second, you're not choosing, you're reacting. And reactions driven by emotion often lead to words and actions you can't take back. Creating even a brief pause changes everything. It interrupts that automatic chain between feeling and reacting. It gives you a moment to step back from the intensity and regain awareness of what you're about to do. That pause doesn't have to be long. Sometimes it's just a breath, a second of silence, or a conscious decision not to speak right away. In that small space, you shift from being controlled by the situation to being in control of yourself. During that pause, your mind has a chance to catch up with your emotions. Instead of being overwhelmed by what you feel, you start observing it. You notice the anger, the frustration, or the tension without immediately acting on it. That awareness weakens the intensity of the emotion because you're no longer fully inside it. You're looking at it. And once you can see it clearly, you have more freedom to decide how to respond. This moment also allows you to consider consequences. What will happen if you react aggressively? Will it solve anything, or will it make the situation worse? When you pause, you give yourself the opportunity to choose a response that aligns with your values instead of your impulses. It's not about suppressing your feelings. It's about managing how those feelings are expressed. People who provoke often expect a quick reaction. They rely on that emotional response to continue the cycle. When you pause instead, you break that expectation. You don't give them the reaction they're looking for, and that alone can shift the entire dynamic. What seemed like a moment of pressure becomes a moment of control simply because you chose to slow down instead of speeding up. When someone provokes you, it often feels personal. Their words might sound like direct attacks, their tone might feel disrespectful, and your instinct is to defend yourself. But in many situations, what they're expressing has more to do with their own state of mind than anything about you. People act out of their own frustrations, insecurities, stress, and unresolved emotions. When they lash out, they're often projecting what they're carrying internally, not accurately describing who you are. If you immediately take it personally, you absorb that energy. You internalize their words and start reacting as if their behavior defines you. That's where emotional escalation begins. But when you step back and recognize that their reaction is coming from their own experience, it creates distance. You start to see their behavior as information rather than a personal attack. That shift reduces the emotional charge because you're no longer tying their actions to your identity. This doesn't mean ignoring disrespect or allowing harmful behavior. It means understanding the source of it so you can respond more effectively. When you realize that someone is reacting from their own stress or insecurity, it becomes easier to stay grounded. You're not trying to win a personal battle. You're observing a situation that doesn't require you to lose control. That awareness keeps your emotions from spiraling. It also prevents you from carrying unnecessary weight. Taking everything personally can be exhausting because it turns every negative interaction into something you have to process deeply. When you separate yourself from it, you protect your mental space. You allow their words to exist without letting them define your mood or your response. That kind of detachment isn't indifference, it's control. Over time, this perspective changes how you experience conflict. Instead of reacting to every trigger, you begin to filter what actually deserves your energy. You recognize that not every comment requires a defense, not every tone requires a response, and not every situation is about you. That clarity makes it easier to stay calm because you're no longer fighting battles that were never yours to begin with. Every person has certain moments, words, or behaviors that instantly spark a reaction. It could be a tone that feels disrespectful, a comment that touches a sensitive area, or a situation that reminds you of something unresolved. These triggers don't appear randomly. They're usually connected to past experiences, expectations, or beliefs you carry. When someone hits that trigger, the reaction feels immediate and intense, almost like it bypasses logic and goes straight to emotion. If you don't understand your triggers, they end up controlling you. You react the same way each time without realizing why. It feels like the other person has power over your emotions, when in reality, it's your unexamined response that's taken over. But once you start recognizing what specifically sets you off, something changes. You begin to see patterns. You notice that certain situations consistently bring out the same reaction, and that awareness gives you an advantage. Understanding your triggers doesn't mean eliminating emotion. It means becoming conscious of it. When you can identify what's being activated inside you, you create a gap between the trigger and your response. Instead of being pulled into the reaction automatically, you start to observe it as it happens. You might still feel the same surge of emotion, but now you're aware of it, and that awareness weakens its control. This awareness also helps you separate the present moment from past experiences. Sometimes the intensity of your reaction isn't just about what's happening now. It's connected to something earlier in your life. When you recognize that, you stop overreacting to the current situation because you understand that part of your response belongs to something else. That clarity allows you to respond more appropriately to what's actually in front of you. As you become more familiar with your triggers, you gain more control over your responses. Situations that once felt overwhelming start to feel manageable. You don't eliminate the trigger completely, but you reduce its influence. Instead of reacting automatically, you choose how to respond based on the situation, not just the emotion. That shift turns your triggers from points of weakness into opportunities for awareness and control. Not every situation requires your voice, and not every provocation deserves a response. There are moments when speaking only adds fuel to the situation, when words turn into arguments and arguments turn into something much bigger than it needed to be. In those moments, choosing silence is not avoidance, it's control. It's the ability to recognize that engaging will not improve the situation and that your energy is better protected than spent. When someone is trying to provoke you, they're often looking for a reaction. They want engagement, emotion, or validation that they've affected you. The moment you respond impulsively, you give them exactly what they were aiming for. But when you remain silent, you interrupt that pattern. You remove the reward they expected, and without that reaction, the situation often loses its momentum. Silence also gives you time. Instead of being pulled into immediate conflict, you create space to observe what's happening. You can watch their behavior without being consumed by it. This distance allows you to stay grounded while they may still be operating from emotion. In that contrast, your calm becomes more powerful than any argument you could make. It also prevents unnecessary escalation. Words spoken in frustration are often difficult to take back, and once a conversation reaches a certain level of intensity, it becomes harder to control. By choosing not to respond right away, you stop that escalation before it begins. You avoid saying something that doesn't reflect who you are or how you want to handle the situation. Silence can also communicate boundaries without confrontation. When you don't engage with disrespectful behavior, you signal that it doesn't deserve your attention. You're not accepting it, but you're also not lowering yourself to match it. That kind of response carries a quiet strength because it shows that your actions are guided by choice, not by pressure. Over time, this approach changes how others interact with you. When people realize they won't get an emotional reaction out of you, they often adjust their behavior. Not because you demanded it, but because your consistency made it clear that certain actions won't get the response they're looking for. In moments of provocation, your ego will speak the loudest. It will push you to defend yourself, to prove a point. to show that you're not someone to be disrespected. It tells you that if you stay quiet or walk away, you're losing. That if you don't respond, you're weak. But what your ego wants in that moment is not always what's best for you. It's focused on winning the situation, not protecting your peace. Choosing peace requires a different kind of strength. It means recognizing that not every battle is worth fighting, even if you know you're right. You can have the perfect response, the strongest argument, and still walk away because you understand that engaging will cost you more than it's worth. That cost isn't just about the situation, it's about your energy, your mental clarity, and your emotional stability. When you prioritize your ego, you react quickly. You match the tone, the intensity, the aggression. But when you prioritize your peace, you slow down. You evaluate whether responding will improve anything or just extend the conflict. Most of the time, reacting out of ego keeps you trapped in a cycle where the situation grows instead of resolving. There's also a deeper awareness that comes with choosing peace. You start to realize that your value isn't determined by winning arguments or proving others wrong. It's defined by how you carry yourself, especially in challenging moments. Walking away doesn't mean you agree with what was said. It means you refuse to let it disturb your inner balance. This doesn't mean you never speak up or set boundaries. It means you do it with intention, not impulse. You choose the right moment, the right tone, and the right approach instead of reacting in the heat of the moment. That level of control keeps you aligned with who you want to be, rather than who the situation tries to turn you into. Over time, choosing peace over ego becomes a habit. You stop feeling the need to respond to everything, and you become more selective about where you invest your energy. Situations that once pulled you in no longer have the same effect because you've trained yourself to value your calm more than the temporary satisfaction of being right. The difference between reacting and responding lies in control. A reaction happens instantly, driven by emotion without much thought. It's fast, impulsive, and often fueled by whatever you're feeling in that moment: anger, frustration, or defensiveness. A response, on the other hand, is deliberate. It comes after a moment of awareness where you choose what to say or do instead of letting emotion decide for you. When you react, you give the situation power over you. Your behavior becomes a reflection of someone else's actions rather than your own values. That's why reactions often lead to regret. Words come out sharper than intended, actions happen faster than they should, and once it's done, you realize you weren't fully in control. The situation dictated your response instead of you directing it. Choosing to respond changes that dynamic completely. It requires you to slow down even slightly and assess what's happening. You consider what outcome you want, what aligns with your character, and whether engaging will improve the situation or make it worse. That moment of consideration transforms your behavior from automatic to intentional. Responding doesn't mean you ignore what's happening or suppress your emotions. It means you acknowledge what you feel, but don't let it take over. You can still express disagreement, set boundaries, or address the situation, but you do it with clarity instead of intensity. Your words become more measured, your tone more controlled, and your message more effective. There's also a sense of ownership that comes with responding. You're no longer being pulled into someone else's emotional state. Instead, you remain grounded in your own. That stability allows you to handle situations with confidence because you're acting from a place of awareness rather than pressure. Over time, this approach builds consistency in how you deal with challenges. You become known for staying composed, for thinking before acting, and for handling situations with maturity. Instead of being unpredictable or reactive, you develop a steady presence that isn't easily shaken, no matter what's happening around you.